Hello Orchid friends, how are you? Welcome back to my channel. If this is your first time watching my video, my channel is all about orchids. From what orchids I have, how I grow them, my thoughts on certain orchid topics, to what orchids in my collection are blooming, etc. So if you want to follow along my orchid hobby adventure, please consider subscribing to my channel and turn on the notification. Today in this video, we're going to look at one of my species orchid in the collection, and this one is Phalaenopsis mariae. I have to give you a disclaimer, this mariae may potentially be mislabeled because it says mariae, but I feel it's a little too, the flowers are a little too flat to be a mariae, so it could be a cross between Bastinii, who knows. But if we go back in time, let me show you how this orchid progressed. So it was toward the end of January 2020 that I started to discover signs of root production, leaf production, as well as a secondary spike. And the reason that it's producing a secondary spike is likely because, well, number one, later you'll see in the video that the primary spike, the original spikes, the tip of it is snapped off. Why? When I was moving this orchid around and I accidentally bumped this orchid into a wall and the tip of it just got snapped off. But I knew that this orchid is a sequential bloomer, so I didn't, I was sad for about a day, and I was angry at myself for not being a little more careful, but I knew this orchid would find a way to bloom if I just provide the right and proper care. This orchid also has a different flower spike toward the base, and that one also grew out sometime last year, but it just never really fully developed. It just kind of stays there, but it's still green, so I'm hoping at some point when this orchid feels that it wants to continue to develop that one, it would grow. So obviously, it's a secondary spike, so it's not as thick as the primary spike. And sometimes I'm always thinking to myself, do I want to let orchids to have secondary spike or tertiary spike? I mean, do I want to do that? Because they get skinnier and skinnier, and then the display the flowers sometimes get smaller too. So at some point, I think it's always better to just cut the flower spikes off and let the orchid rest and then produce a new spike to give us better display. So that's just an opinion and something I've been thinking about, but I haven't really, decided that if I want to do that one to this orchid. So this one, mariae, doesn't really strike me as an orchid with, super strong fragrance. In fact, I don't smell anything much, if at all. But this one really is known for the color pigments on the flower, and I was first drawn to its red/purple, red and purple kind of pigments throughout. And this one is really just more red pigments on a white flower, a creamy white flower background. It doesn't have much of purple, and that's okay. But the one thing that I'm a little disappointed is that, it doesn't really look like a typical mariae because it's just so flat. When it's in full bloom, the flower is really fully extended. It looks very energetic. I like that. But the mariaes that all my friends have and their blooms, the mariaes look a little, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but it's just not very flat and fully extended. So I was suspecting, and I am still suspecting, that this is if it were a true mariae, maybe this is a cross that's hybridized to improve so that the flowers are more extended, or it's mislabeled and it could be a cross with Bastinii, because Bastinii also share similar characteristics, but then the flowers are a lot more flat and extended when it's in full bloom. Another interesting thing about this orchid is when it first blooms, the white background is more prominent, but as the flower age, they will, I guess, that the red pigments would eventually get a little softer, and then the white would become more of an yellowish. So I guess the red would eventually invade the white space. Kind of like what you see here. You know, at first the white is more prominent, and then gradually you see some yellowish pink, you know, be in between red and white. So the color combination do change as this flower age. This orchid is in semi-hydro, and when I first got this orchid, it was a near blooming size plant. So I put it into a 12-ounce container in semi-hydro setup, and I use a mixture of hydrocorn and manto clay, and the ratio is about 1:1. It did really well. It grew lots of roots and even produced super amount of aerial roots, which you'll see in a little bit more detail closer later in this video. And it grew and grew. Eventually, it actually grew so much that the cup got a little bit of the cup actually just kind of erupted a little bit. So I had to use another cup of the same size to double cup it, and then put it into a blue outer cup. And that blue outer cup is to reduce sunlight exposure, so that we can reduce the amount of algae that may form because of the sunlight. But you know, it's purely an aesthetic reason. It's not something that would hurt the orchid if you don't use the outer cup. I give this orchid about actually no, this is a 12-ounce cup, so I give it 1/8 of a cup of water each time. Sometimes I do give it a quarter cup, but that's if I feel this orchid is looking too thirsty, and I may do that. Or if I notice that I have low humidity in the environment, I would up the amount just a little bit. Quarter strength fertilizer, so 25%. And every week I water this orchid. I give this orchid water every week. At the end of the month, I always make sure I fill up the water, well, just pure water, up to about 80-90%, and then just let it kind of hang out, sit in water for a couple hours, and then I would drain the water completely. As you can see here, it has a lot of aerial roots. It's definitely grown since I purchased it. The bottom leaves are pretty small, as you can see, and then the top leaves are bigger and bigger. So that is a very good sign that this orchid is definitely maturing as it should, and it's receiving the right kind of care that it deserves. So I guess my question to you is, do you think I should repot this orchid this year? I mean, if you look at the roots inside the media, it's growing and it's still having some green tips, and it's definitely getting enough water from just this little container. Having lots of aerial roots outside, I mean, it kind of satisfies my craving for seeing crazy orchid roots. But at some point, for sure, I will have to repot it. It's just whether should I do it this year or should I wait a couple years? Because technically, this orchid is doing fine, and because it's in organic media, the media don't break down. So if I don't have to, do I want to repot this orchid? What do you think? What's your opinion about whether I should repot this orchid this year versus next year, or not until I have to? Let me know what you think, what I should do with this orchid. Maybe you know, you can leave a comment down below in the video and let me know what you think. So number 1 is repot it this year. Number 2 is wait for a couple years. Number 3 is don't do it unless I have to, meaning maybe root rot issue or pest infestation issues, whatnot. Let me know which way you think I should handle this orchid in terms of repot timing. This is all I have for you today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you would like to get more orchid related videos from my channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification. I want to wish you happy growing, and I will talk to you in my next video. Ciao!